For today's video, we're going to be discussing progression when it comes to video games. And this kind of concept I've been thinking about with how open do you want your progression curve to be in a title, and what are the pros and cons of curating or locking content from the player. A long time we did a video about reactive versus mechanical gameplay. And a major part of that was just how much freedom do you give the player in terms of how they play through a game. Is it going to be 100% completely locked, or can the player kind of react to what is going on and make changes accordingly? And for today's video, I want to kind of expand on that with something that I've been thinking about lately when it comes to progression in video games. Now, progression curves and systems in all video games are, to some extent or in essence, are a curated or guided experience. You can't go level 1, 7, 18, 25. And when we look at a lot of video games these days, there tends to be kind of two extremes in terms of how much the progression is open to the player. On one end of the line, we have games that are very much, here's the world, do whatever the hell you want in it. You can be good, bad, you can survive, you can die within 2 minutes. It's entirely up to you. And these are titles that typically do not have any kind of locking or gating elements to them outside of those that are kind of intrinsic to the game, such as you need to earn enough money to buy better armor, or a higher class ship, or more soldiers in your army, and so on. And the example up there right now is, of course, from the original Disgaea. And Disgaea is one of those games that, as anyone who's played it, it pretty much opens up its secondary and subsystems after about 10 to 15 minutes of play. Do you want to spend hours in the item world? You can do that. Do you want to start transmigrating and crafting the ultimate party? You can do that as well. Go through the Demon Assembly and so on. And the game basically leaves it up to the player to say how much or how little do they want for that. Other examples, of course, would be the 4X and Grand Strategy games, who are known for just basically giving you all the systems from the start. And for those kinds of games, it would be an entirely different experience if these systems were locked or gated behind progression. Imagine playing Civilization where nobody can do any kind of military or research military tech until turn 500. It would be a completely different game there. And of course, probably the most famous example of this would be the space sim genre, where basically it goes, here's our tutorial, fly from here to here, and now the entire universe is open, enjoy the next 100 or so hours of our game. And the beauty when we talk about progression systems that are open like this is that it allows the player to pretty much go all in terms of playing. They know that they are given as much freedom to fail as they are to succeed, and it leaves it up to them to figure out what they want out of this experience. The problem with this kind of design, though, is that one little nasty point, the failing. Because most consumers don't like to play a game where it's, here, choose A or B. Okay, choose C or D. Okay, you chose wrong, restart the game and try again. And that is the common issue with games that are so open in terms of the progression that you are essentially giving the player the rope that's going to be made up, that's going to turn to their noose if they fail. And it can be very frustrating, as we've seen with many RPG-based games, where you are given complete character control and you have no idea what any of these systems are, so you're going to build a character that is going to be completely suboptimal or not even optimal at all, and you won't figure that out until about hour 25. So, I hope you have an extra 25 hours to get back to that point, or you read a strategy guide before you started to play. And when we talk about a lot of these open-ended systems or open-ended progression, this has definitely been a major part of PC games and the PC game culture. The idea that the player is again given full reign over everything, and has led to very mechanically and system deep titles. We can look at stuff, of course, like Grim Dawn and Path of Exile from the ARPG genre for this example. And the beauty about this is that it allows the player to essentially move at their own pace. Some people are going to progress way faster than other people who are going to have a lot harder time. If you look at something like The Binding of Isaac, for instance, it's probably one of the few somewhat curated roguelikes, or one of the first, that it starts still pretty much open as you would expect from a roguelike game. But the more you play it, and the better you are, you're going to be unlocking more content, more enemies, items, events, etc. And it only unlocks when you have proven you are ready to do that. So a new player who is struggling with the game is not going to be forced to fight Delirium or Mega Satan in The Binding of Isaac. You have to get good enough to unlock that content. And again, this is one of those advantages of the curated system, and a really good segue to it. When we talk about curated progression, in this case, systems, mechanics, gameplay are inherently locked behind the progression curve of the game. So this is not the same case as in you must, grind or somehow accumulate $50,000 to buy a new ship. This is basically saying this entire chunk of gameplay or this entire system, you can't do it yet until you've hit at least level 10. And Disgaea did something similar to this with Disgaea 5, which they tried to make things a little bit more friendly to new players, and they locked subsystems of the game behind chapter progression. So you start playing Disgaea 5, and you literally could not do the item world. Which, as a hardcore fan of the Disgaea series, that was just completely broke my mind for a second when that happened. And we've seen this a lot with AAA titles, live service games. This idea of extending the progression curve or stretching it out as far as you can go. If you look at something like The Division or Diablo 3 as examples, that these are games where new choices and new abilities are not available until you've hit certain leveling. In Diablo 3, for instance, you cannot find set items until I believe it was level 60. I think that's when they first started off, or level 70. I forget when they did the 1.04 change, or 1.4, whatever that number was. And the other example that we're going to switch to when we get to the back half of this video is going to be Warhammer 40k Martyr. What Martyr did, and one of the most shocking things, is that weapon types are locked to the leveling curve. So you literally will not get certain equipment drops until you've hit different level thresholds. Just imagine in Diablo if Blizzard said, from levels 1 to 10, only swords will drop when you kill an enemy, and then when you hit level 10, you unlock daggers. And then at level 13, shields. I better be careful saying that. They may do that for Diablo 4. We don't know yet. But the advantage of a curated system is that you are basically in control over how you want that experience to go. It's very hard for the player to essentially, put themselves in a corner if the design is gating them in such a way that they are forced down a very straight or very incremental progression curve. They can't go any higher, and they can't go any lower. And like I said with the Binding of Isaac example, this can work to allow players to not to bite off more than they can chew. But the problem with this kind of progression is that it makes things feel very, I think for lack of a better term, gamey. It's an idea that here's this game, but you can't do anything in it until we say that it's okay. The Division did this pretty handily by locking the world tier system to level 30. Again, the Diablo 3 example. And like I said earlier, some genres could not really work, at least not in their basic gameplay, if we locked systems like this to progression. You must play, imagine playing a Paradox Interactive game. You cannot unlock diplomacy until you've played the game for 10 to 15 hours before it. And like we said, there are pros and cons to the system. So after this quick break, we're going to talk a little bit more about Mortar and why this becomes a double-edged sword in terms of how open do you want your progression systems to be. And now for a quick shout out to our current Game Wisdom supporters and sponsors. Going forward, all Patreon supporters will get early access to our videos. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, link down below. If you're looking for more wisdom about game design, be sure to check out my latest offering of books, 20 Essential Games to Study, aimed for first-time developers and students looking for some inspiration for their upcoming games, and Game Design Deep Dive Platformers if you're interested in anything regarding 2D and 3D platforming design. They're both available in print, digital, and wherever books are being sold. So here we have footage of Warhammer 40k Mortar. And this is a game that, when it was first launched as an ARPG, it did not review or was very critically not well received. A lot of people complain about the progression and just the overall gameplay of it. And similar to Diablo 3, the developers went through and basically did a complete overhaul of all the game's systems, progression, and so on, and of course turned that into a free update. Now, I did not play Mortar back when it first came out, which means that I am somewhat limited in where I can see it. But from playing the game as it is now, this is one of the most curated ARPGs I've seen in terms of progression and design. And it's kind of the inspiration for the video and possibly the post I want to write about this kind of progression. Like I said in the last part, with Mortar here, everything about this game in terms of its gameplay is locked to your levels. The game features different passive skill trees that are unlocked once you meet certain conditions, such as hitting certain levels or completing specific tasks. Systems such as being able to change the difficulty of the game are locked until you begin the campaign or until you beat the first chapter of it. The game has multiple areas or multiple aspects of content that are only accessible as you play further into it, such as on finding additional modifiers or difficulty designs for missions, bonus mission types, and like I said, even the very gear and itemization of the game is locked to your levels. And it's not a case, again, of finding better weapons. It is changing what your actual ability to play the game based on how far you level up. You see, in Warhammer here, your skills, those are the little items you see in the bottom left that are kind of blocked by my face there, they are determined by the weapons that you have equipped. So if you're using a single-handed sword, you're going to have a different skill set than if you were using a flamethrower or a shotgun. And this was to make combat feel more actiony, more dynamic. So by literally locking these choices behind the leveling and progression systems, it is making this game feel very curated. So as you can see right here, as my character is leveling up, I'm getting, of course, the standards, passive points and things like that. But then I'm unlocking new gear. And this is kind of the point I want to talk about for the back half of this video, about when curation goes too far. And I was talking about this on Twitter, and Mortar here feels so gamey. And I can't think of a better term to use. If anyone can think of one, let me know in the comments below about how much the mechanics kind of override anything in terms of story or content to the game. And again, the pro here is that a new player who has never touched an ARPG before is going to be met with essentially kid gloves. They're not going to be given too many choices because literally there are no choices when you begin playing the game. You all get access to the same each class or character type gets access to the same, or gets access to 2 weapons that belong to that class, and then the rest become unlocked as you play. But the downside is that the experience of playing this game is so sterile, or it feels that way to me, that it makes it hard to really get into it. And the counterexample of this would be something like Grim Dawn or Path of Exile. Yes, both games have their content locked to leveling. You're not going to be able to access your Mastery's ultimate skill in Grim Dawn at level 5. But the player, once again, is in control. And even with that said, nothing in terms of gear or the basic gameplay is locked to the leveling, or hard locked, I guess I should say. Again, because of how the masteries work in Grim Dawn, you'll get access to skills as quickly as you're able to apply mastery points to them. You could focus on a small subset of really great skills, or just pump your stats and get access to the higher tier skills first. But again, the player is the one who's in control. With Martyr here, I am not in control. I try to raise the difficulty up, and it's not changing, or at least I don't think it's changing the itemization. I'm getting the same chance of dropping gear as I would if I put it on normal, or if I bumped it all the way up to, I think it was like Eye of Chaos. And again, the advantage of this is that the new players are not going to feel like they're being pushed into the deep end and asked to swim. But if I've already proven myself, then it just feels like the game is handicapping me, like I'm on a leash. And this is again where that concept of one of my least favorite phrases comes from. The real game begins at X. That you can't start playing the game until you've gone through that quote-unquote gamer tax and hit the level before the game just says, okay, it seems like you've finally proven yourself, now you can enjoy and play the game as you see fit. And this is the danger that you have to watch out for when it comes to designing your game. That while you want to give some level of curation, again, a lot of this comes with UI design, tutorial design, onboarding, you have to be able to understand how limited you want your game to be. And again, what your audience is, or who your audience is for this game. Imagine if Warhammer 40k Martyr was aimed at the same audience as Grim Dawn or Path of Exile. I can't imagine anyone who really loves those systems getting into this game, because so much of this content is just artificially locked or kind of railroaded by design that you can't really design a character, not in the same way as those games do. Now, again, with something like Martyr here, I am very sure that for the people who have hit the level cap, which I don't even know what that is because I haven't gotten to it yet, that is an entirely different experience. It's probably a lot of fun to min-max and actually prepare your character at that level. But to ask someone to spend 20, 30 hours, or I don't know, even more than that, before they're able to access that, it turns the game into a war, or punishing them for playing it before they get to the good stuff. And we could certainly say that with a game like Grim Dawn and with Path of Exile, I'm not so sure about Path of Exile, but with Grim Dawn in particular, they could do a better job in terms of onboarding or presenting the systems to them. And again, that is a different topic when it comes to playability and onboarding for a player. But when we're talking about progression in your game, the best kind of games are those that essentially allow the player to feel like they're the ones in control. If I am really good at the game, I should be able to speed through any kind of artificial roadblocks or gates that you want to set up. Let me get to where I feel I'm comfortable at. Likewise, if I'm new to your game and I'm horrible at it, then the progression should allow me to basically go at my own pace. I don't want to feel like I'm being punished for playing your game. But if I can show that I am better or that I'm a better player at it. And like what I said, this is one of those topics that it's really subjective based on the game itself. And oftentimes why some of the better games are more about the player being in control. Mario, or the three Mario games, are really good examples of this. That players can progress at different rates in Mario Odyssey or World or wherever based on their mastery of the mechanics. But at the end of the day, and this is kind of going to be our final point for this video, every player should still hit the same baseline or a mastery of these mechanics. So whether it takes me 20 minutes to prove that I'm a master or 15 hours, players need to arrive at that same point, and they need to feel like that experience was made for them. If I've proven that I'm a master of your game and you won't let me do anything with it until hour 15, I am going to walk away from that game. Likewise, if I'm a new player and you are expecting me to be a master from minute 1, I'm going to feel overwhelmed, and guess what? I'm going to walk away from that game. And it really takes the hand and the eye of a great game designer to be able to present their game in a way that accommodates for everybody. And ultimately, that's our major point for this video. That progression is the one in control. And there are subtle ways that you can do this as well. So just having systems or things that the player can do to make things harder, but allows them access to better stuff earlier. The World Ends With You is a great example. That loot of higher quality or more complexity becomes available if you can play the game at a higher difficulty. Or if the game gets too hard, you can lower the difficulty down at any time and then just kind of put it back as you see fit. This is again why player controlled difficulty or choices or content can be very effective at allowing them to decide how far they want to go. Again, you don't want the game to tell the player whether or not they're good enough. You want the player to do that. And to wrap things up, my question for you watching this, can you think of really good examples of games that kind of, kept the player on a leash, but the player didn't feel like they were being tied to it? And can you think of examples of games that you played that were either too open that you felt overwhelmed and stopped playing, or were too constricting that you felt like the game was just kind of, again, tying you up and you couldn't really enjoy it? Let me know in the comments below, but thanks for watching this video. As always, if you'd like to suggest a topic for me to look at, let me know in the comments below. Check out the Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, take care. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoy things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel linked down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.